again for joining this webinar. Today we're going to discuss how to activate student voices in week one. Thank you all for being a part here today. I'm going to leave you with Vicky de la Cruz. She's part of Yeldig, the client success team, and she will be moderating this webinar. So thank you again for joining us. And if you have any questions, please put them on the chat. So without any further, Vicky, this is your show.
Thank you so much, Brilliant. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We have an amazing discussion coming up. It's all about participation and how we can deal with it during the first week. It's very important, right? It's going to it's going to make a very big change for the whole course length if we really talk about it during the first week with our students, if we work on strategies, right? And we know that participation can be something kind of hard to deal with. So we're going to be discussing all about that today. All right. We have two amazing speakers with us. They use Yellowdig as well, and they're going to share all their experiences before they use Yellowdig, after using the platform, right? So it's going to be amazing. I really appreciate you being here with us today. And as Belen said, I'm Vicky, Success Partner here at Yellowdig. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We're going to try to talk about them during the discussion, right? And if not, we're also going to leave some space at the very end to go through them. This session is also going to be recorded in case somebody couldn't join. All right. And of course, we're going to share our contact information at the very end as well, in case you would like to get in touch with the Yellowdig team. All right. So let me first introduce our two panelists today, because that's completely important. These are two amazing people with us today. So let me give you a brief introduction to them, and then we're going to start with the discussion. All right. So starting with Dr. Wesley Boyce, he's an assistant professor of practice in the Department of Supply Chain Management and Analytics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He earned his PhD in business administration with an emphasis in logistics and supply chain management from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. He teaches course in operation management, supply chain management, and business analytics. His research focuses on improving student engagement in online courses and on a wide range of topics in supply chain management, logistics, and transportation. All right, so that's Dr. Weasley. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we also have Dr. Margaret Larson. She has earned a master's in science in nursing and a doctor of nursing practice, and she's an assistant professor of nursing at Penn West, Edinburgh, with extensive experience in both clinical practice and education. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Nursing and Masters of Science in Nursing from Edinburgh University, and her Doctor of Nursing Practice from Robert Morris University, along with a certificate in medical education. She has more than 25 years of experience as a nurse practitioner, serving in veteran affairs, primary care, and endocrinology, and has worked in diverse clinical settings, including the ICU. All right, so these are our two amazing speakers today. Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss this topic, to share your experiences. I think this is going to be great, so I'm very excited. All right, so if we can start with talking about the principal, the main topic of today, which is the problem with participation, students participating, right? This is our base today. And first, I would love to hear, before we enter to these specifics, I would love to hear from you two, Meg and Weasley, how it was before you used Yellowdig. How was the participation in your classes? How did you deal with it? And if you don't mind, so we can, you can both talk, right? Let's start with Meg, then we go to Weasley, and we keep it going. All right? So yes, Meg.
My mute off. Okay. I have to say that most of my courses, I do teach some face-to-face courses, and I then teach online courses, and I'm teaching mostly at the graduate level. And before that, I did have, I teach both didactic and clinical courses. And so I would be on there and I would get discussion board I had to use discussion boards. And so they were very kind of scripted, everything was like APA. And there was like more of a focus on the students on just like making sure they hit the rubrics. And then I would get an email occasionally, that was maybe a little more intimate, but I didn't feel like I really knew the students in the way I would have liked to. The students I run around the hospital with, I kind of get to know. But even them, I don't get to know in the way that I'm getting to know them here. So when I go on, I do like an introduction and, kind of a very humanizing introduction. I don't like to, I don't go around saying I'm Dr. Larson or anything like that because I want them, these are master's students that are going to be practicing things. I want them to feel confident with other people, but I've really gotten to know them and I've been pretty surprised by how much they share and how much they help each other to connect with like ideas. Like if one of them is having trouble with like a cardiology thing, somebody in my course is a nurse in cardiology. So they'll say, oh, this is a really great video. I have gotten so much more interaction. I'm pretty surprised. Now, I have to say, I'm a talker, and I think a lot of nurses are talkers. So it works well for them because they were kind of floating out there, I think, in isolation. And now they kind of all know each other and things. So I think it has really helped the class engagement incredibly.
Oh, that's amazing to know. I know that you have very incredible examples, and I love for you to share that in a few minutes. But yes, it's all about the human connection, right? Participation. It's all about that. Not only students as part of the academic world, but as people, right? As humans as well. So yes, of course, Mike, thank you. Weasley, what about your classes? How was it before you had Yellow Day?
It was a struggle, I will say, succinctly. There was, of course, I tried to use traditional discussions, and it went about as well as most would expect at this point, I think. It's kind of hard to avoid having a prompt in those, and I think Yellow Dig helps you move away from that, which is just fantastic. I still get students that say, "What's the prompt?" early on when I'm using Yellow Dig if they haven't used it before. And I say the whole point of this is there's not a prompt. So, but it was a lot of uh, shallow contributions, I would call it. So students would answer what was the prompt because, like I said, it's a little bit hard to avoid in that situation. And then I'd get a lot of "I agree" or "good post." It was not substantive at all, and it was severely lacking in students contributing and engaging. So it was something I was excited to move away from.
So it's a completely different environment with Yellow Day, right? Everything changes. It's more natural conversation.
Absolutely.
Um, yes, of course. Well, thank you both for your thoughts. And well, if we talk specifically about the problem with participation, we know that there may be lots of reasons. Of course, us as the instructors, we need to work on strategies or use different tools, for example, Yellow Dig, right? Um, to go to the problem and try to solve it because it is something that it happens, unfortunately. And that happens with every single course, every single term, right? And here we have a few reasons why maybe participation is a struggle for students, right? Sometimes they have this fear of saying the wrong thing. Maybe it's a very large class, right? And they are a little bit shy of, okay, I need to participate. What if I say the wrong thing? Maybe someone is going to laugh or it's going to be embarrassing, right? So that's one part of it. Not every single student is going to be completely brave about it. That's not reality, right? Then, of course, we have unclear expectations. Maybe they don't know how to participate. Some instructors, in some cases, right? There are those type of instructors who like to be in front of the class and give the class, and maybe they are not expecting a lot of conversation. So if students, if you want to hear their thoughts, then maybe that's another reason for no participation. We also have previous negative classroom experiences, and these we can go as far as when they were in school, right? There are many negative experiences, and I have some of them as a student. So I completely understand those students who struggle. And well, the last thing, and it's connected to the first one, very large classes. I don't know if your classes, Megan Weasley, are they very large? What number of students are we talking about for your courses?
For a didactic class, I only end up with about 40 students or fewer. And the clinical classes are actually very small. I usually put a couple clinical groups together, but they're also very afraid because they're afraid that they're going to make a mistake with a patient. And so there's some resilience building that we're doing, I think, too, with this, where, there's some support going on there about, bad cases and things like that. So they seem to feel very safe, but it is smaller classes.
Yeah, I have classes as small as 15 or 20 maybe for graduate courses. And then every semester I have an undergraduate course that has usually at least 300 students. And I leverage YellowDig for that as well, just because that's such a large class. And especially in an online setting, it's really easy for them to, you could say, get lost and have zero engagement. So I like to use YellowDig just to allow them to interact with one another and sort of bridge that gap since it's online.
Yes, of course. So it really depends on the amount of students, but we have basically the same issues, right? It's the same situation with every student. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And Tammy, I'm going to ask you if you can skip this one because we were talking a lot about the previous one, and here we're going to talk a little bit more, right? So why does participation matter over here? So I would love to hear from you, Meg and Wesley, other strategies that you use. You mentioned discussion boards. Of course, now you use YellowDig, but what other kind of stuff did you use to try out with your students to have more participation? Like, what did you do back then?
I actually would try to have, they weren't mandatory because we're asynchronous, but I would try to have a few Zoom meetings and have, do a case presentation and try to do like a grand rounds, but I couldn't mandate that they came. And very few of them came. And then when they came, they absolutely would not give me a differential diagnosis. I knew they were sitting there and they knew or had some good guesses. They wouldn't do it at all. So that was a big problem for me because you have to be able to present a patient and actually come up with a diagnosis. And then even for the patho classes, I'd say, what do you think's going on? And nothing, absolutely nothing. So, I mean, once in a while I get somebody, but it was really hard. So if I do the same thing, if I just show a patient on YellowDig and like put it up there, they will start talking about it and trying to figure it out. So that's been a really good change.
All right. Yes, of course. That really helps. Yes. And what about you, Wesley?
Yeah, I think before I used YellowDig, it was more punitive, I would say. It's a little bit difficult to avoid that where people aren't participating. So you have to say, okay, I need a minimum number of posts, maybe 3 posts, or 1 post, 3 replies, whatever it happens to be. It turns into a punitive thing where I turned more into a gatekeeper or maybe like a policeman than one who can engage with the students and help them learn. So it was really nice to move away from that and having to be what I'll call the bad guy.
It's completely connected to what we mentioned about discussion boards. We say that we don't want to be Darth Vader because that's what happens, right? We end up asking students to be very engaged with those prompts when we have discussion boards. We think that they're going to be having discussions with their peers, but actually, at the end of the day, they're only answering to us. So most of the answers that we get, they're very similar. It's the worst to grade those. So yes, of course, I understand. So when we're talking about participation, right, and when we know that it matters, when we know that we want that participation from our students, we're talking about trying to create habits from the very beginning, trying to let students know that, yes, we want to hear them. Yes, their thoughts are important, their opinions, their experiences. And YellowDig, of course, is going to be an environment for that, right? And we're going to talk about it more in depth in a minute, right? But yes, I completely agree with what you said. Tami, let's go to the next one, please. All right. So now we can go straight to YellowDig, right? How this changed when you started implementing YellowDig, right? It's a whole big shift, right? So instead of you creating the prompts or creating many assignments for your students to participate, you started using Yellowdick. So I would love to know why, like before you started using Yellowdick, why was your motivation to start using it? Like, what did you expect it was going to happen before you even started?
I actually felt really disconnected from the students, and I just didn't feel like I knew them at all, and even my face-to-face classes, I want to be honest, I don't know them as well as I know the people that are in my online students that use Yellow Dig, because they'll share a story that I don't think they would like walk up to the desk or just raise their hand and tell the whole class. So I think that I guess that's been the major thing, that I just never felt like I knew them. And then they're in clinical practice settings. I thought, what if one of them's really unusual? Or, you know what I mean? I felt a little nervous that I didn't know them and they could be just anyone. So this way, I actually feel a lot more confident in who they are, because I can kind of see it. I mean, I realize they could be faking it, but they're really quite engaged with each other. I can see how they interact, and I can get a good idea that they'll be, kind to the patients, or, you know what I mean? We're very patient centered in our program, and that comes through because they're nice to each other. I think it's been really good for me to meet them in person online.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I think really the Darth Grader thing, as you mentioned, is the big motivator for me when I switched. So I really needed to have them discuss and show me what they knew and try to engage, but it just simply wasn't working. So what I did was just started asking colleagues, what do you do? What are other options that you're aware of? And one of them mentioned Yellow Dig, so I started to explore it and really just started understanding how useful it could be compared to what I was used to.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes, of course. And well, let me ask you something else, and this is related to your own classes, right? So, how do you manage the use of devices in your class? Because students nowadays, they have their laptops, their tablets, their phones, right? They can use it during class. Of course, maybe they're doing something important, but how do you manage that? Even if your classes are online, right? You don't necessarily know if they are watching you, if they are talking to you, if they're doing something else. How do you handle that part of teaching related to participation?
So for us, we're asynchronous, and maybe for me, it's maybe a little different. A lot of, in healthcare, you're kind of doing the patients a disservice if you're not extremely good with technology and knowing the databases and where to get the guidelines and things like that. So we actually, like, I think this week I said, I did make a subject in Yellow Dig, and I'm like technology. And so they started sharing some of the things they use with each other. So for me, I'm not an English, I'm not teaching English or something where it's like cheating to use AI. Like, we're trying to not, hurt anybody. So I don't mind it. And so it's kind of we're treating it sort of as a friend in my classes. So I don't have a big problem with that. And they, I'm telling them that, just be great at finding things, and they are, and they share them. So that's how, I mean, for us, we don't have any of the problem. I did want to go back to one thing about why Yellow Dig's better. Besides the fact that I know the students, and I actually enjoy it. Sometimes I get in there and I'm like, oh, I should have done something else, because I'm reading so many and responding. But it's not, for me, not only are we not being punitive grading so many discussion boards, it's like such a relief not to grade them, to me personally. I don't have to go through and look for the one thing I was looking for and things like that. So I wanted to mention that because that's true.
Completely important, right? You're engaging you yourself as an instructor. You're also connecting with your students, which is great. You're not focusing on the grading part, which is not very nice. You're focusing on getting to know your students, trying to understand them. Then we always say, try to check the conversations that happen in Yellow Dig, right? And bring them back to class and talk about them during a session, right?
The other thing is, the really great students that early on start really writing some really insightful, fun things. They do kind of pull the other ones up. I think it kind of makes them feel like, I should be performing to this level, and they actually get a lot better.
Hmm. So I guess that is also better for when they have maybe some group assignments, like they have to work with someone else. Maybe they don't know their peers, right? Now with Yellow Dig, it's a little bit better because they know each other. Maybe they can share something that they read or they commented, right? So yes, of course. Wesley, what about you? How do you handle these use of devices in your class, like AI? How do you deal with that in your class?
So the literal use of devices is a little bit difficult to speak on. My classes are also asynchronous, so it's a little bit to the effect of they can do whatever they want as long as they're getting the material done on time and watching the videos. I do try to leverage my videos and lectures to include important information that would almost hinder them if they're not paying attention. So I make sure that they're basically important and worth watching. For face-to-face classes, there are a little bit beyond the context of what we're talking about, but polling tools often help and things like that, just to more or less embrace their devices. Say, I know you have them, you're going to use them, so let's use them in class. So here's this polling tool. Let's answer some questions together. For something like AI, I've been on the fence about that for a while. I think I'm starting to embrace it more just because it's here and I don't think we're going to have a choice. So I'm trying to start leveraging that and maybe even integrate assignments to that rather than fighting it so much.
It's here to stay, right? It's not going away. It's
Yeah.
going to get even bigger. So yes, we need to deal with it completely. So yes, while we are still on this slide, I wanted to share this with people who are in the here as attendees, right? Maybe not everyone here has experienced Yellow Dig yet. All right. So of course we're talking about how it was before Yellow Dig and how it is now for Meg and for Weasley, right? But something that we really encourage in a Yellow Dig community is for instructors to be active members of the community, for you to not only be there to help students, to guide them through the whole process, to check if they're having nice conversations, right? But also for them to know that, okay, you're there, you're another human, they can talk to you, they can share different types of conversations with their peers, right? They know what to do, how to handle Yellow Dig from the very beginning. So if we connect it to participation, they know the expectations from the very start, right? They know that the instructor is there as an active member. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, right? But I wanted to mention that. I don't know, Belen, let's make a little stop. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a question here. Well, it's not exactly a question per se about the topic, but about how Yalavi can help not also in class, but also be a co-op online community to keep the students engaged, supporting each other, and allow an insight into their challenges in real time. So I was just running here, Tracy, on the chat that we can do that we can explain her a little bit better after the webinar. We will contact her and send all the information regarding that part. So before we continue, one of the things that I would love for our speakers to share with us is what do they really think about how the shift of you see in classes, for example, before you started seeing the creation of IA, how you see people interacting, and how you see that is changing right now, all with social media, phones, and everything. Do you think that it's getting harder to keep students focused on the topic, on class? And how do you think that engaging a belonging and participation can help to reduce those incidents? So if you would respond that question, that would be great.
I do think that because it has some resemblance to some of the online platforms, they feel kind of at home there. And they're just making comments and they're putting links in and things. So they're reading in shorter chunks, but maybe higher stakes kind of interesting topics to them. And since they're guiding it, they're more like each other maybe than I'm like them. So I can kind of see what they're talking about and try to put something that's really helpful to them in practice or something with it. So I think the fact that that's what people are used to and are somewhat addicted to with their phones and everything does mean that this is more effective for them than any of the old-fashioned kind of platforms that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. The social media feel is always something I really push just because, like Meg said, it's something they're already comfortable with. So even if this is new to them and they're nervous about it, it's usually a transition that is seamless. The other thing I like about Yellow Dig, which maybe is less applicable to social media or maybe doesn't apply as much, is I would almost say psychological safety. They can they can open up and say their thoughts without, as we mentioned earlier, the fear of being belittled or made fun of, whatever it is. Maybe shared purpose would be another thing that I would talk about, just because we're all trying to achieve the goal of learning more and discussing what's relevant in class and really just gaining some momentum with participation. And that's something that Yellow Dig really helps a lot with. The other thing I would mention is the gamification aspect. Generally seems to help a lot too, just because it's almost like a game for students. I'm scoring these points, I'm earning points, and I'm just proceeding that way.
I love
And
that.
and it's they know when they get their little celebration thing, it's happening pretty fast. But a lot of them keep writing even after that week's points are done. The other thing that's I think is maybe something to do with social media was, this is just an example I'll use of like something I think the students will really remember. So they were going over a pregnancy complication. Somebody saw it clinical and she was talking about a liver inflammation, how painful it was and what happened with the patients and everything. And all of a sudden, this student who's a retired veteran who really doesn't talk a lot, he's average, he told an entire story about how his wife almost died of this and the entire patient experience. I was absolutely stunned by this, because I just wasn't expecting that from him, but he was very passionate about it. And I know 100% that everyone in the class that read that will never forget the whole story of that complication, and hopefully never miss it.
Yes, completely. Since I remember that story, you already mentioned that to me, and it stayed in my mind already. So yes, completely. And as you can see here, with that type of conversation, there's no a need for AI, because if you're having a real natural conversation, you don't really need it. There's no reason to use it, right?
And I just can't imagine that in a class of even like 15 or 20, that this gentleman would have raised his hand and said, let me tell you this story. He just wouldn't have done it. So even in face to face, I don't think that.
Yes, of course. He felt that safety net, right? A safe environment. You were there, the students were there. I guess a lot of people commented, reacted to that specific post he created, right? And it's something that, as you said, nobody's going to forget it. And it's something additional to your class. It adds a lot of value. And that's what we aim for, right? So, yes, thank you. Thank you for those stories, for your thoughts, right? Tammy, let's continue to the next one, please. And here we wanted to hear your thoughts on, how did your students, when you first started using Yellow Dig, or when you have a class that has never experienced Yellow Dig before, how do your students react at the very beginning? Do they know what to do? Do they know what to expect? How do they manage that new platform? Okay, there's no prompt here. What do I have to do? Do they like it? How do they feel? What do you know about their experiences? What have they shared with you? Yeah.
So I am very informal in my, here we all meet, we're meeting for class the first week is kind of how I'm doing it. And I do introduce myself informally. I put stuff about my dog and my family and, my life and then I put some of my experience. And I try to make it so that like they feel like they can just talk to me like I'm their friend on Facebook or something like that. I do want to mention something about this that I thought the other night. People used to, 100 and 150 years ago, have a very letter writing kind of relationships with people where they wrote all these letters and stuff. And then we didn't do that anymore. People called on the phone and then they text. And then this is almost back to like writing letters if you were in this like a scientific club or something like that, in my opinion. So, but I do try to be very informal. And the same thing, like I encourage the students to like, they start sharing their health stuff really early. I mean, I can't, but like their health problems, like this just happened to me. And then somebody in there like was only about 60 and we were doing osteoporosis that week. And she came on and she goes, I just broke my hip. Like, I just can't believe that they're sharing this. And she's like telling us how it went wrong, how her care wasn't really right. So I think that it's such an informal platform that it's very easy to make it informal. It looks, I'm not saying it doesn't look professional because it does, but it doesn't look like a bunch of square gray boxes and things like that. It just feels very homey for social media.
I like that. Thank you. Wesley, what about you with your students?
I think I just like to set the tone early, and that is set the tone that there's not a rigid structure here. The whole point of what we're doing is to discuss and branch out and talk about whatever you think is interesting or relevant. So similar to Meg, I start by briefly introducing myself. Basically, I want them to know I'm a real person. You know, I have a family, I have children. I want them to see that and let them know I am vulnerable just like them. So I also just encourage them to, tell me about yourself and your background, because I think in my courses, these are business students, especially my graduate classes. If they start understanding each other's backgrounds, they can start understanding how they relate to the material and how maybe they relate to their own background. And it really starts to generate good discussion and helps with examples that they share later, which is really important for my course. Maybe not quite as life and death as Meg's, but still very important for what we're doing. But I also say, what can you bring to the table? Do you have any questions? Are you uncertain about anything? I literally just tell them it's wide open, very low stakes, and that generally leads to what I would call high authenticity of what they're sharing.
I think that's great because with your specific courses, right, the ones that you teach, it's very important to understand where they're coming from, right? Maybe they're from a different country and they bring stories or experiences or something that's going on in their country, right? And they bring it to the class as an experience and they relate it somehow to what you're seeing in class, right? So it's completely important and it makes a real connection between the different classmates, right? So yes, of course. Although it's not nursing, it is very important still. Yes,
Right.
of course.
Yep.
Yes, of course. I completely understand. Well, thank you. Now we're entering all the way to Yellow Deck, right? Let's go to the next one, Tammy, so we can talk a little bit more about this one. So yes, we have been mentioning how Yellow Deck can get involved in these cases in these two courses, right? We offer, and this is for everyone who is watching us, we do offer a lot of support to the instructors who start with Yellow Day. At the very beginning, we try to guide you through the whole process so you feel comfortable. We know that a lot of instructors come from using discussion boards, and this is a completely different environment. So we guide you through the whole process. And we do have different things like we mentioned gamification, we have a point system, and the good thing is as Meg said, right, students, they earn the points, they feel good about them, right, but at the end they continue talking because that's what they care about. They want to keep talking, they want to keep the conversation going, so they forget about the points. And we also have some topic tags, right, that are going to be making sure that we're talking about course related topics, discussions, right? And that's where I wanted to stop for a little bit because we already talked about how your students feel at the very beginning, and maybe that's connected with the expectations, with us telling them what it's expected from them, right? But what about the topic tags? We have this system for the topic tags. We create a bunch of them at the very beginning of a community, right? And sometimes instructors don't know how to grade those topic texts. Like, what topics do I create? I would love to hear how you first created yours. Like, what do you think when you're creating those?
For me, in the didactic class with Patho, I actually just used whatever body system we were on that week. And then there are nurses that work, so they're in nurse practitioner school, but they're all like one's in the cardiology lab, one's in the labor and delivery. So it really actually worked out pretty well that there were people that kind of almost took over the class for that week and told all this stuff and took pictures of these weird Watchman coils they're putting in hearts and things like that. So that worked out really well. And then in the clinical practice class, we have like very nursing likes to have a lot of rigid rules and domains and think competencies and stuff. So I just actually used those headings and just said, hey, could you guys hit on these headings? Like, tell me how this competency you thought this week's clinical might have worked. And that's worked pretty well so far. I mean, I may change it if I find something else that works better, but they've talked about what we said and then kind of branched off. So it's been pretty good.
All right. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I've transitioned from using very broad tags to getting a bit more specific. So at this point, a lot of my classes are broad. So a supply chain class, for example, will cover a lot of different topics. So maybe sourcing and inventory and transportation, logistics, etc. So we're kind of jumping all over the place since it's a broad field. And I think these tags really help us to, for a given week, focus on that topic. And given that they can still pull tags from any week, it still allows you to continue previous discussions, which is always really nice to see.
Of course. Yes, and let me ask you this. I'm very curious to hear this from your classes. So since you started using Yellowday, right, your students are there having conversations, having discussions. Have you seen any changes in participation during class, like outside of Yellowday? What have you seen anything different?
I would say for my students, they're kind of spread out, but quite a few of them are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have had them like say, "Hey, this clinical rotation I'm in is great," and the doctor or the nurse practitioner I can't remember who it was would probably take another student. So they've helped each other a little bit to find some placement. And I've told them, keep in contact with these people that you get to know here because there'll be contacts for jobs and things like that later. So I'm hoping it's pretty early. I'm hoping that this, forges a community that at least some of them stay in contact with each other. Because I've told them, like when I was in practice, I had a nurse practitioner I contacted all the time that was in cardiology because I was in primary care and say, please, would you look at the EKG really quick or something like that. And I tried to reinforce the value of having like a peer group after graduation. So I actually am hopeful that that will happen.
Yeah, I've had
Thank you.
positive experiences as well. And when I've used it in a face-to-face class, it almost seems to break down some barriers when students are in class because, well, we've already discussed and we're comfortable with this. So I'm assuming we know who everybody is, which in a large class can be hard no matter what. But usually in a smaller class, 20 to 40 people, it really helps to initiate what's going on within the classroom later, just because, like I said, they're already talking about it, so they can just keep going with it. And similar to what Meg said, I've seen a lot of the interactions as well, where students, especially at the graduate level, um, are familiar with each other's problems, can help each other solve problems, and it really branches out to I would almost say more of a professional relationship beyond the course that I think they can help each other later. So that's always pleasant to see.
Okay, nice. Yes, I was very curious about that. Like outside of Yellowdick, what goes on in your courses, right? And of course, that means your students maybe they're creating good connections, right, with each other, which is great. Tammy, could we go to the next one, please? All right, so here we have this little yellow dig map that we like to show, this little graph. And this, I'm not going to go in depth here because normally we do that during demos and we have a bunch of videos about that, of course. But I wanted to focus here to just show you that we can have, during a course, we have many topics that we're going to be talking about, right? Since the beginning until the very end. And we have the different amount of weeks, right? But we can start talking about something and the conversation doesn't need to end. It can continue until the very last part of the course. Students start creating connections with one topic from the very beginning, with one from the middle, right? Or maybe your conversation stops for a while and then, I don't know, maybe they watch a movie, they see something on the news, right? And they want to bring it up to the Yellow Day community, they want to talk about it. So that's the dynamic in Yellow Day. And I wanted to hear your experiences with this. If you had these situations where students talk about something that you're no longer talking about right now, like currently, but they bring something from before or they make connections with different topics. How has that been going on with your classes?
I do see that quite a bit because, especially with the tags for the body systems, a patient may come later with something that was related to another system and they will go back to that and tell the story, or somebody will figure something out. The other thing is if they find a really great like study aid, they'll go and post that, later on for something because they're going to all be taking these huge tests later on. So I think that's very helpful. They'll say, "I'll look at this video. This explains it even better than the stuff we did in class." I don't take affront at that because there's a huge world out there. But so I do see that a lot, that they go back to some of the older topics. And then I have an empty topic that says you choose for each class so that I'm not, too tight with them that way.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, so I have to admit, I saw this slide and it almost just was like a light bulb went off in my head. Like, wow, this is a perfect summary of what's going on here and why it works. So, the old way would be not at all spread out like this or connected like this. A given week or a given topic might have one or two early on, but all those yellow people on the slide would be at the very end of the week almost. It would be very heavily weighted to the last minute, and that seems to have gone by the wayside with Yellow Dig. But in short, as the slide indicates, I would say there are just interactions abound within a given week, beyond given weeks. No more flooding the board at the end of the week or whatever the period happens to be, like I just explained. So, and really, when they do that, discussions are impossible because everyone's just dumping their thoughts at the last minute. No one's really reading what other people are saying. So, this has helped with that as well. So, there's more engagement, there's more actual conversations too. Now, related to supply chain management, the continued conversations over time, it's really, really useful and practical because, especially, thinking something like COVID-19 when I was using Yellow Dig during that time, supply chain was all over the news and, toilet paper was out, everything was out of stock. That sort of conversation continued throughout the semester. And honestly, it still happens today because it's just such an easy and clear example of some of these things. Students are still talking about these things, and it still spans multiple weeks of a course or sometimes the entire course. So I really like how this looks and think it summarizes it well.
The other thing about
You
this,
mentioned. Yes.
oh,
Yes, Meg. No,
the other
sorry.
thing about this is I was going to say that when he said that, it made me think about something. Usually we would do like, okay, I'll just say, cardiology, and there'd just be a column down and it was over with. And then you were the next one. And now there's more like an assimilation of knowledge, like something might be a cardiology part, but then there's a pregnancy complication and they'll put it kind of together, or they'll put both tags in. So I think in that way, it's very good too. Kind of like what he was saying, where you were talking the whole semester about
Yes, of course. I love those examples. Those are great. And yes, Weasley, as you said, this is a very nice example of how it looks like in reality. I love that example of the paper. That really happened here. I live in Argentina and that happens. That still happens, although we don't have the pandemic anymore. um, I know that we're running out of time. We only have 10 more minutes, but I wanted to focus a little bit more before we go to the final conclusions. We have this red person over there, right? Which we call the procrastinator. It's not necessarily because it is a person who is a procrastinator, but that student that maybe has a lot going on, or they struggle a little bit to organize themselves, right? Or they have something going on. How do you manage those students? Have you had any experiences with students who maybe are not coming so many times to the community? What do you do with those students?
I do look to see who's falling back on their points, and there usually is at least one person like that. And then I just find them and try to talk to them a little bit on it and draw some of the other students to them a little. And that does usually work. Then they kind of go back and forth a little more.
Yeah, I get that a lot, especially in graduate classes where, I'll have someone getting an MS in supply chain management who maybe is a consultant and they work 80 hours a week. So it's almost impossible for them not to be a procrastinator in some respects. And given the uh, openness of Yellow Dig, I don't get on them too hard. I try to encourage them more and, maybe give them an accolade that, maybe it's deserved, maybe it's not, but I just want them to know I'm looking and that what they're saying is being heard. Or, I like to leverage the summaries that I can generate using Yellow Dig. I think it's called Community Recap, if I recall. And that just gives me an easy way to maybe not have to track things so much. So I don't have to know like who got the most likes or who was engaged the most. It tells me, I can know what I think the good posts are just because I read them, but something like that. So sometimes I use that to call out students and give them credit for, you did a good job, good post. And so everyone else can see that. So that's another way. If there's a procrastinator, maybe I just sort of backdoor them into that just to just call them out subtly, but in a positive way. So they know that everyone is paying attention.
Yes, of course. It's a way to motivate them, right? With
Yep.
those athletes, maybe, as you said, maybe they don't really deserve it, but it's a way to say, like, hey, I'm here. You're doing great. Keep it up, you know?
Yep.
So, yes, of course, I agree with you. I don't want to take a lot more time because I know that we have a few questions, right? But to tell me if you can go to the last one, the one before the questions. Yes, so I think it's the next one. But maybe as a to sum it up, right? We have been talking about participation. We know that it is kind of a struggle at the very beginning, but we, the instructors, are the ones who can make different decisions. We can work on strategies. And of course, if you like, you can use Yellow Dig to increase that participation to let your students know that they can talk. They are free to talk, to share their experiences. We want to get to know them. And then we want to know what they are understanding, make connections with what they already know or what they see on the news, things like that. So it's all about participation at the very, very beginning. And that's going to change the whole course, right? I don't know if Meg Weasley, you would like to share any final thoughts, and then we can go to some questions.
I did want to mention that, like in the course evaluations, when I use I get like at least four like actually written out things that they liked it, which they don't usually say too much about anything, so they will talk about that in the course evaluations, which is good for me, obviously, and it encourages me.
Yeah, of course. Hmm.
I would echo that. My evaluations usually have a positive reflection on Yellow Dig. There's always one or two that didn't like it, but honestly, what I like to tell students is you get what you put into it. So if you're not going to be involved and engaged, then you're probably not going to get a lot out of it. But as really just a final thought, I would summarize my thoughts on Yellow Dig as it's more approachable to students. It's more comfortable generally as a result, and they're less likely to what I'll call hide as they might in a face-to-face class setting or a traditional discussion setting. So really, it gives them a voice. So they may not be confident with that voice, but it helps them use that voice and develop that voice. And really, just in general, it leads to natural interactions that help to build community where otherwise it might be difficult.
Yes, of course. We give them a voice with this space, right? It's not only their students and they need a grade, but they are people and they are important and we want to know about them. We want to know their thoughts, their opinions, their stories, everything. So yes, well, I really appreciate you two being here with us today. I know that we took some time from your schedules, but we really appreciate it. Belén, I don't know if there are any questions that you would like for us to answer.
Yeah, so we don't have any questions in the chat right now, but I just wanted to sum up what we've talked here. It's very important that when we are starting a class, one of the biggest issues that we see is that we don't see our students interacting. And as the webinar called How to Activate Student Voices, here we were giving you some ideas that you can use in your classes. We talked about how Yeldic helps, but there are other tools you can use, as for example, what our panelists were talking about. So if we are going to sum up, because I didn't see that we have any questions, I would love for you, Megan, Wesley, to give us a final thought on how you see the biggest change of giving your students the possibility to talk and to speak and to give them this voice. What was the biggest shift the change that you see from when you don't allow them to give them these spaces, and how are you seeing this transformation right now? So if you can just finalize with that thoughts, that would be great.
I have to say, I feel like I see or sense that they're relieved to have this group interaction. I almost think, they talk about the death of the third space, that everybody just goes to work and comes home and maybe sits on their phone or whatever. This is, it's a virtual place, but it is a community for them. And I feel like it's sort of a relief to them when they're talking about things that are happening to them or something, having trouble with, a concept in a class, and then they help each other find the solution. I do feel like there's a sense of relief. I don't know if I'm imagining that, but I do feel that in the class. And I'm relieved because, like you guys have said, I hated grading discussion boards all the time.
Yeah, I would
Thank
echo
you.
that. I think the relief is real from all sides of things. Students don't feel like I'm, breathing down their neck and scouring every word they say, because that's not really what I'm doing. So, like I said, I'm no longer that gatekeeper, and that helps them open up more, utilize the tool better, the tool being Yellow Dig, and have better engagement, really. So these fluid communities allow them to have that openness and freedom to talk about what they want. So they really start to interact much better, and that improvement is definitely real.
Thank you. I love that. Okay, so I see that we don't have any questions. So thank you so much for joining us today and for being part of this webinar. It's always great to have these conversations and to interact and to try to, understand what we're seeing in reality in classes in all the universities, online, asynchronous, in person. We are seeing these issues. So talking about this, it's important so we can find solutions that can help us beyond using us on Yaudig or not. This is a conversation that we need to have. So thank you again for being a part, and for our speakers to join us in this webinar, for Vicky to being the moderator here. And we will see you soon in another webinar. Thank you again for having us and for being here today.